Brother-in-law's love confession to my wife sparks family chaos. Yesterday, out of nowhere, my brother-in-law casually asked my wife to meet him for lunch. He claims there's something pressing he needs to discuss with her. My wife, puzzled, informs me about it before agreeing and wonders if this might somehow be connected to my sister. Could they be having issues and he seeks a woman's perspective? I find the whole scenario peculiar, yet I tell her to go uncover what's really going on. So she accepts, and the next day, they meet at a nearby spot close to her office. And that's when he drops the bombshell. He's in love with her. He goes all in, showering her with compliments, gushing about how beautiful she is, how she makes him feel, how if she were his, life would be an entirely different affair, how it was love at first glance, and so on. But here's the kicker. This man is married to my sister with 2 kids. Up until this moment, my wife and he had a cordial relationship. Our families spend quite a bit of time together. He texts her frequently, but there had never been anything inappropriate, nothing to raise any red flags. He even texts my mother, so nobody really saw this coming. I want to be clear, my wife is not cheating on me. We share an iPad, and I can see every message she sends. Plus, we regularly glance at each other's phones, so there's absolutely no sneaking around. My wife didn't even let him finish. She walked out, immediately called me to recount everything that happened. As she's on the phone with me, he starts bombarding her with texts, saying he didn't mean it, that it's just an infatuation, and so on. She leaves work early, comes home to talk, but her phone is constantly buzzing with calls and texts from him. I tell her to answer, and she puts him on speaker so I can listen. He's crying, pleading that we don't tell my sister. Apparently, over the weekend when we were all together, he interpreted my wife's playful personality as flirtation, and in his mind, they had shared a moment while alone in the kitchen. Now, my wife has a pretty sarcastic sense of humor, and I can see how he could misconstrue that as flirting. He asked if my wife told me about his confession, to which I respond, since I'm on speaker, yes, she has. Then he starts begging me not to say anything. This went on for a while. My main concern was if he had ever cheated on my sister before. He swore he hadn't, even swearing on his children's lives, claiming this was all about my wife, that I should understand. At that point, I'd heard enough. I told him I wasn't going to make any decisions that night and that I'd call him the next day. Now here we are and I'm at a loss. My wife insists I should drive over there right now and tell my sister everything. But the thought of dismantling my sister's family is eating me alive. Thinking of how it would impact my nieces makes me sick. I know the right thing to do is tell my sister, but I'm also deeply concerned about my wife. She's blameless, but I know there's bound to be some resentment toward her from my family. Even if my sister chooses to stay with him, I can't imagine us ever having the same family dynamic. This situation has the potential to fracture everything. I don't care about him. He tried to sabotage my life, but I do care about everyone else involved. I'm at a loss. To all of you who said I couldn't wait to tell my sister, you were right. A little after midnight, my sister called, saying she needed to tell me something. Asterisk, she believed my wife had tried to initiate an affair with her husband. Asterisk, he pinned the whole thing on her. I told her that wasn't the case and that I'd come over immediately. I called my parents, woke them up, and informed my younger brother as well. My parents went over to my sister's house to be with the kids, while my brother came to ours to watch over our children. My wife and I then headed to my sister's place. When we arrived, my sister and her husband were outside on the porch. He looked utterly defeated, knowing we had the text messages and voicemails as evidence. I have no idea what he thought he'd accomplished by lying. My wife handed my sister her phone, and she read the text, listened to the voicemails, and before she could say anything, my brother-in-law started sobbing. It was quite the spectacle. He's a firefighter, a big, tough guy, and here he was completely breaking down. My sister, though, is strong. She told him to stop, pack a bag, and leave. She couldn't even look at him anymore. He begged, but she had no patience for it. My sister then pulled my wife aside to talk, and I saw them hug. At least that gave me some relief. Their friendship, which dates back to college, seemed intact. The thought of this situation destroying their bond had been weighing heavily on me. This left me with my brother-in-law. He was utterly broken, and I felt more pity than rage. He apologized, saying he couldn't help himself. He confessed that it's easy to fall in love with my wife. I get that, but still, this is beyond messed up. Eventually, he left, and we spent the night with my sister. She started questioning why her husband would ever think something like this could work. What had given him the idea that my wife reciprocated? My sister insisted their relationship had been fine, No issues at all. My wife was crying by this point, saying there was nothing inappropriate going on. She handed my sister her phone again, and they went through every text exchange from the last 2 years. There was nothing. My wife has always had a playful personality, especially with family. She even jokes around with my mom and younger brother the same way she did with my brother-in-law. The only instance she could think of was that kitchen moment when they both reached for the fridge and he wrapped his arm around her to grab a beer. She admitted that his touch felt a bit inappropriate, but didn't think it warranted making a big scene. She now thinks that maybe, by not addressing it, he'd gotten the wrong impression. Fortunately, my sister doesn't hold any of this against her, so that's a relief. Later that night, my sister started going through her husband's MacBook, trying to uncover any other secrets. She guessed his password, and what she found was disturbing. A folder full of pictures of my wife, dating back years, many of them taken on a trip to the Caribbean we all went on together. My wife had worn a bikini, which is rare for her, but it was an adults-only resort. He had around 50 pictures of her in that bikini. This had turned into something beyond obsession. It was creepy. Unfortunately, the nightmare persists. Last night, my sister agreed to hear her husband out, allowing him to explain himself. She put my wife on FaceTime during the conversation, ensuring no deceit. I was listening in from the background, and my sister recorded everything. He admitted to being obsessed with my wife for years, claiming it all began the day he first met her. My wife and I were already dating, but he had met her before meeting me through my sister since they were longtime friends. At first, he believed his feelings were purely physical, but as time passed, he realized it was more than that. At that point, my sister nearly kicked him out, but she let him continue. She eventually asked what made him think my wife would ever leave me for him. He said there was obviously mutual attraction and that he figured they'd start an affair, which would naturally progress from there. At that, both my sister and wife erupted in anger. There was a lot of shouting, a lot of swearing. The call ended and my wife hung up, visibly shaken. She was more concerned about me at this point, assuring me that his delusions were entirely one-sided. I never doubted her. I know even if she found him attractive, she'd never act on it. She's fiercely loyal and trust means everything to her. Early on in our relationship, she once caught me admiring her while she was dressing. She had smirked and said, "Enjoy it, but don't screw up or you'll never see this again." And she meant it. I've always known my brother-in-law was a bit full of himself, but this took it to another level. Later, I talked to my sister. She's consulting a lawyer on Monday to discuss what steps she can take to limit his access to their kids. As far as she's concerned, he's living in some twisted fantasy world. That's all I've got for now. My sister has officially kicked my brother-in-law out. She filed for divorce this morning and is seeking full custody of their kids. He's completely unhinged at this point, constantly texting both me and my wife, begging for another chance. We've blocked him on everything, but he's still finding ways to reach out. My wife and I are trying to move past this, but the stress is taking its toll on her. She feels incredibly guilty, not for anything she did, but because of how this is affecting my sister the nicest. It's heartbreaking to watch her blame herself for something entirely out of her control. I'm committed to being there for my sister, and my wife has been nothing short of incredible through this ordeal. She's tough, stronger than I ever imagined, and her focus is on keeping our family together and healing. We've also been in touch with a therapist to work through the emotional trauma this has caused. The days following my sister's decision to file for divorce have been a whirlwind of emotions. My brother-in-law, despite being kicked out, continues to try and reach out to both my wife and me. He's gone from pleading for forgiveness to lashing out in anger, blaming my wife for ruining his marriage, even though it was his obsession with her that led to this whole mess in the first place. We've blocked him everywhere we can, but he still manages to find ways, creating new email addresses, using other people's phones to send messages. Meanwhile, my sister is doing her best to stay strong, but it's clear this is taking a toll on her. She's a fantastic mom, and her focus is entirely on her children, ensuring they don't feel the full brunt of what's happening. However, the reality of her situation is starting to sink in. She had a life built with this man, and now that's crumbling. She's angry, heartbroken, and deeply embarrassed, though I've told her time and again that none of this is her fault. The betrayal she feels isn't just about the affair attempt, but also the years of deception, years where her husband was silently fixated on someone else. My wife, though she's a strong person, has been struggling as well. She feels guilty, not because she did anything wrong, but because of how all of this is affecting the people around her. It's hard to watch her carry that weight. She's been nothing but honest and transparent throughout this ordeal, and I've made it clear that I don't blame her for any of it. Still, she's worried about the long-term effects this could have on our relationship with my family, especially my sister. We've been seeing a therapist together, trying to navigate the emotional fallout. The sessions have been helpful, not just in addressing the immediate feelings of betrayal and anxiety, but also in reaffirming the trust and love we have for each other. My wife has been a pillar of strength through this, and I've never felt more grateful to have her by my side. As for my brother-in-law, the situation has continued to spiral. Last week, he showed up at my sister's house, unannounced, demanding to see the kids. My sister called the police, and though they didn't arrest him, they did warn him to stay away unless it was a prearranged visit. My sister is now pushing for a restraining order, not just for her own safety, but for the peace of mind of everyone involved. His behavior has become increasingly erratic, and it's clear that he's not thinking rationally anymore. In the midst of all this, my family has been incredibly supportive. My parents, though shocked and devastated by the situation, have rallied around my sister. They're helping with the kids, providing emotional support, and even offering financial assistance if she needs it during the divorce process. My younger brother has also stepped up, being there for both my sister and me, which has helped ease some of the burden. There's still a long road ahead. My sister's divorce is going to take time, and we're all still processing the emotional fallout. I've realized that while this has been one of the most difficult experiences of my life, it's also brought out the strength in the people I love. My wife and I are closer than ever. My sister is proving to be incredibly resilient, and my family has shown how truly united we are. Moving forward, my priority is to support my sister as she rebuilds her life. I'll be there for her and my nieces in any way I can, whether that's helping with the kids or just being a shoulder to lean on. I also want to continue nurturing the bond with my wife and making sure she knows she's loved, supported, and absolutely not responsible for any of this. I appreciate your support, and while this will probably be my last update, I feel compelled to share the final developments as things come to a close. We've all been in a state of emotional exhaustion. My wife and I have been processing everything in our own ways, trying to regain some sense of normalcy in our lives. The trust between us is solid, but the emotional impact of the situation lingers, especially with my wife still grappling with the guilt of having trusted my brother-in-law, unaware of his feelings all those years. We've had several heart-to-heart conversations since that FaceTime call. My wife admitted that the idea people might believe she had reciprocated any feelings still haunts her. I've reassured her time and time again that anyone who knows her, or us, would never doubt her integrity, but the emotional weight of the situation has left its mark. It's hard to shake off the feeling of betrayal, not just by him, but by the situation itself. Counseling has definitely crossed my mind as something that might help her process everything, but for now, we're taking it one day at a time. As for my sister, she's been incredibly strong through this nightmare. After consulting her lawyer, she's moving forward with divorce proceedings. The evidence we gathered, text messages, voicemails, and his own confession, has put her in a favorable position for full custody of the kids. He doesn't seem to be fighting her on this, which is both a relief and a sign of just how much he's given up. There's no salvaging their marriage, and while it's painful, I think she's relieved to have made the decision to move forward. She doesn't want him out of the kids' lives entirely, but she's made it clear that he won't have the same access to them as before. As for my brother-in-law, he's kept his distance since returning to the house. The few interactions he's had with my sister have been purely about logistics, childcare schedules, household finances, and divorce paperwork. He's been quiet, almost resigned. I don't know if he's fully grasped the depth of the damage he's caused, not only to his marriage but to our entire family. My parents have been devastated, and it's clear that even if my sister moves forward and rebuilds her life, the dynamics in our family will never be the same again. One unexpected thing that came out of all this was the closeness it brought between my wife and my sister. My wife has always been like a sister to her, but this ordeal has solidified their bond in ways I didn't anticipate. I think, in some strange way, my sister now sees my wife as someone who had been wronged just as much as she was. They've spent hours talking and processing everything together, which I think has helped both of them heal. Watching them support each other through this has been one of the few bright spots in an otherwise dark time. As for me, I'm doing okay. There are moments when the anger flares up again. How could he do this? How could he risk tearing apart our family over a fantasy? But then I remind myself that harboring that anger doesn't help anyone, least of all me. I have to focus on supporting my wife and sister and on keeping our family moving forward. We've all suffered enough. Now it's time to heal. Looking ahead, my wife and I are planning to take a short getaway, just the two of us, something to clear our heads and spend time together away from all the chaos. We need it. We deserve it. And I think it'll be good for us to step away from everything for a bit, even if just for a few days. In conclusion, this entire experience has been nothing short of heartbreaking, but we survived it, and I'm confident we'll continue to heal. My sister is moving toward a brighter future. My wife and I are stronger than ever. And while the road ahead won't be easy, I'm hopeful that time will help us all put this behind us. Thank you to everyone who has followed along and offered words of support. You've helped in ways you can't imagine, and for that, I'm deeply grateful.